It's cold. You can go ahead, Steve.
Okay, this is January 20th. It's about 6:01 PM. My name's Stephen Huzay. This is a meeting of the Laws and Ordinances Committee. Fellow committee members Jen Warden and Tyler Owens are in attendance, as are other council members. Just wanted to start off with Mr. Marion, who Manager Planning and Zoning is also in attendance. I believe he has a presentation for us, and then council members should have plenty of time afterwards to ask questions of Mr. Marion and the administration regarding the zoning code changes 2026 edition. Mr. Marion, if you'd like to kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Huzay, members of council. Also here this evening is Kim Wilson with OHM, who was the consultant that the city retained to assist us with this process and guide us through the amendments and the process that I'm going to go through here tonight. So some of this, what you're going to hear tonight, you're going to call me a broken record, but I've said these things over and over and over again over the last several months as we've been engaged in this process, and a lot of the memos and information that I distributed to the steering committee and several of you, all of you, over the course of time. So why do we engage in this process of wanting to amend the code and map? And it all goes back to the comprehensive plan that was adopted by the Planning Commission in 2024, and in late 2024 when we started looking at the zoning code to see how we can make adjustments to meet those goals and objectives that were identified in the comp plan. So some of the highlights of the comp plan were we needed to develop more housing options accommodating various economic situations, increase opportunities for open space and recreational activity, preserve farmland through strategic growth, do not relax but increase design standards as we're looking at changes to the code, preserve the style and personality of established neighborhoods and pocket communities. And you'll see how some of the amendments have been actually, the original recommendations were altered during the course of this process to meet some of the comments that we received from individual communities and neighborhoods. So the land use objectives identified was to allow for a range of housing choices, alter the limitations on some of the residential sections that allow for more mixed-use type developments, support infill development in and around the city, strategically look at the focus areas that were identified in the comp plan, and I'll go through those here in a few minutes, and to continue to grow smart. New residents want residential areas that feel safe, have green sites and amenities, and allow off-site green space to be set aside. The process involved about 20 to 25 steering committee members, council representatives, residents, developers and builders, business and manufacturers, real estate professionals, healthcare, social services and housing providers, and members from the Planning Commission, the BZA, staff. There were also some other agencies that were, I can see that Main Street had a representative on the board, as well as some other parties that are a key partner. We had 4 full committee members of the board, 4 afternoons. We engaged in exercises, studying the 5 focus areas that were identified in the comp plan. We had various exercises and homework assignments that the steering committee took part in. And we did an analysis of, OHM did quite a bit of the analysis of homework and presented that as we went through their findings. And several drafts of the code and map were reviewed, including one-on-one conversation with committee members. But just as a sample of some of the work that went into how we come up with the different types of typologies that were identified in the code. We looked at the existing zoning map, the committee did. Looked at future place type maps with emphasis on our facilities and our focus areas, and compared how current actual development compares with what the code says. So here's just a sample block, urban context block saying at West Henry Street. Here's the block, how it is developed, and how it is developed versus what our code says. So these were exercises that were engaged in throughout the community to see how actual development occurs with what our current code requires. Kim, please jump in.
Yeah, sure. One thing I might mention is that one thing that probably stood out and does in most communities is that neighborhoods that were developed, including the downtown, were developed before there was zoning per se. There was subdivision regulations, there were deed restrictions, there was some other standards the community had that basically kind of dictated how things were going to lay out. By and large, there was no zoning. So what's happened is as standards were developed over the years, particularly the first code that was done, it was more or less, we'll just guess what we need for setbacks and heights and things like that, and hope it works out, and we'll have some non-conforming situations as a result. And so what we did was we identified what those were and how they varied from what was actually on the ground, and then show, hey, some of these things actually do work, even though they're not consistent with the code right now. And I can imagine when the community was going through, some of these residents who were going through renovations, they found out that they're just non-conforming, and we have to kind of bend the rules here a little bit and get things done the right way, put the branches, things like that. So over time, some of them had kind of fallen in line, but basically there were some that, were consistent and understandable.
So we looked at various areas of the city and did exactly that analysis. And then strategically looking at the focus areas. One of the homework assignments that the committee had looking at the various focus areas. And so here's the downtown or the Arts District that was identified in the comp plan. This for medium density residential, this for first floor commercial with some residential above. That's our traditional commercial district in the library, Wayne Center for the Arts, and how that should be developed around it. So the homework and assignment entailed looking at these various blocks within the Arts District, and we asked the committee to identify what kind of development or structures that they would like to see in those different areas that match the corresponding color. And we did that for every focus area. Here's the the East Liberty and Val area, the hospital area, the Smithville Western area, and then finally the Dyer's Chapel area that were all identified in our comp plan for focus areas. So, and then the results were tabulated from that homework and mixing in the block sampling data. And you can see the findings of what the steering committee thought would be the appropriate type of development in those various areas that correspond with the focus area. I'm not going to read through these one by one. But I wanted you to get an idea of the work that went into developing the type of recommendations that are before you. So this is the suburban typologies. Here's what they were like: a suburban residential, single family, a driveway, potentially with a backyard alley. Cluster residential would be appropriate with some condos and patio homes. What was learned? And this is a combination of what we learned through the comp plan process and through the steering committee that was reviewing the code, that we want to allow for more mixed use, allow for more diverse housing options, and allow off-site green space to be set aside. So in terms of the actual code, I'm going to summarize the high points. Zoning districts and use tables updated to reflect new zoning districts. The R1, which is currently suburban residential, is renamed R1 residential district. R2 is renamed the urban residential district. R3 attached single family district is eliminated, and R4 multifamily becomes R3 multi-unit residential. The goals identified in the comp plan that this is attempting to achieve is allow for additional housing options and strategic growth and farmland preservation. Here's just a sample of some of the changes in terms of development standards. Here's today's standards for an R1, R2, and the RT district, 8,700 square feet, 6,543, and we go down with the setbacks and height restrictions, lot coverage. Basically, the new change is that the R1 assumes the current R2 development standards, and to add to that point, everything that's been developed in the last couple of years, well, since spring one, I guess the last 4 years, has been following the R2 development standards. Spring Run, Clear Creek, Fish Lake, all development, Woodcrest, are all developed under the R2 development standards. So here you see the new districts, R1, R2, and RT. There was discussion about eliminating or combining. If you look at the R2 versus the RT standards, you'll see they're very similar, except in terms of lot coverage. We felt that it was extremely important that the RT district remain and keep its identity. So rather than mingle that in with the R2, which is primarily the area around the college north of Bowman, that's where the R2 district currently is, well, it's being proposed is, and everything else would become R1, that's single family around the rest of the city. We felt it was extremely important for the RT folks and for the RT community south of Bowman to remain, to keep that identity. So we kept them as a separate district. But you'll see they're very similar in terms of development standards. And the lots are similarly developed. They're just
Can I ask a quick question?
yes, sir.
Because the RT, I mean, that 10-foot frontage, that's pretty small. Do you anticipate new construction to come into RT, or do you just, is that kind of, do you feel like that's a grandfathered type of zoning that just happened way back when and they're just that close to the road?
The current, well, the way it's currently developed, there are some instances where it's further set back. We are actually working with a couple of developers that have acquired several lots in the RT district and are proposing new homes. But primarily, this will be for 1 or 2 lots that need to be developed. As we are looking at the transition districts, which I'll get to in here, it'll be an accumulation of several lots to meet the design standards for those transition districts. But you won't be able to just, if something's in the T district that we're proposing, simply acquire a single lot and build a transition structure. You're going to have to acquire several.
Right. I think my question was more along the lines of, I just saw the minimum frontage of 10 feet, and I'm just like, boy, that's awfully small, and I'm just trying to think, are we gonna really allow in new construction 10 feet?
You'll find some existing structures that are just a few feet.
And that's what I'm getting at is,
Right to the sidewalk.
yeah, and I noticed, I mean, on some of those streets, they're real close, and I'm just trying to think, is that what we want new construction to be? I get it that may have been how, like you were alluding to, there was no zoning standards way back in the day. Is that what we want going forward?
And looking at it at the standard RT lot of 2,000 to 3,000 square feet, you're not gonna be able to redevelop that unless you have a really short setback.
Okay.
So if I could add, if you were paying attention, I know Vince was scrolling through them a lot when we were doing that block sampling. And you'll see a lot of them are at that 10 feet or so. And one of the things we found that OHM really pointed out to us when they did, and they did a lot of different block sampling around the RT, several areas down there that seemed to be pretty indicative of how it was developed over the years. And then, of course, all the other residential districts around the city. But what they found was the current lot sizes, how they are now, and the current code that we have right now basically made it almost impossible. It extremely limited the ability to develop, in a lot of cases prohibited it. And so what you had was we were actually disincentivizing investing in our RT district. And it really wasn't, really clear to us until we saw those sampling and saw what it looked like. So I guess for me, that was sort of one of those light bulb moments, like, because then when you look back at it, one of the things we looked at during the comp plan process was, that's where you have your highest, percentage of property maintenance violations. That's where you have your lowest improvement in values.
Right.
And so there is a sense in which we were facilitating that a little bit because we were disincentivizing some of the, so part of what this is how can we, re-incentivize putting
No, I
those two things.
understand where you're at, Joel, and I was thinking more of a safety, being that close, but I'm assuming these are all 25-mile-an-hour areas and,
Well, some of the other things we looked at, and then I know you'll get to this, is adopting design standards. So if we are going to allow that kind of development, there's going to be some standards. It has to look like and be, situated like this. So maybe it's a brownstone, you've seen a nice, those tend to be right on the street, with, less than 10 feet away, or 10 feet or so, pretty close, and those can be done in a really tasteful way that really attractive, so.
I would just point to the condos down where the home nursing home are. Those, I don't know if it's 10 feet, but it's certainly got to be close.
yeah.
And the remaining district the remaining RT district already has some design standards in place. And I'll get to what we're looking at here in the next
Okay.
phase of. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And here are the multi-family development standards. These are today's development standards, R3 and R4, minimum acreage, minimum lot frontage. I have that sit here and read these to you. But the proposed is to eliminate one multi-family district and create just a single R3. And here are the development standards, 2 acres versus 1 or 2 in the R4. Maximum residential district, 25 units per acre, and there'll be standards associated with that in terms of design, location, spacing, height. Total lot coverage, we go from 35 in the R3, 60 in the R4, 55 and 60. The maximum lot coverage is the same. And then we're introducing new districts into the code, transition districts. Transition districts are separate zone designations to create a transition between higher intensity uses, the buildings that are along your major corridor, and the uses that are along your major corridor, and lower intensity uses, mostly single-family residential neighborhoods. They're usually 1 to 3 blocks wide, and usually along the main corridors around highways that are private or institutional use. Benefits of the transition districts is it concentrates more intense residential uses around multimodal corridors, providing more access to transit, allows for more housing diversity while maintaining the existing character inside the neighborhood. So here you have your major corridor, and you can see how like a commercial district might be developed, or downtown could be developed along Liberty or Market. And then you have some transition areas as you're going into your single family neighborhood. There's 2 transition districts that are being proposed, T1s and T2s. Here's the typology of structures or size that we're looking at in terms of density, number of units per building for a T1 district, duplexes side by side or stacked, triplexes, pretty similar, except we've got more density in terms of units, more single-family attached, independent living but attached, like the townhomes you see on just south of here. Cottage court, where you might have some shared common area going through rear yards. Courtyard type development, and a live work type development where you have commercial or low intensity commercial on the first floor or residential units above. These proposed changes meet the following goals identified in the comp plan: additional housing options, increased mixed-use opportunities, neighborhood preservation with increased design standards that are laid out in the code. Some changes to the cluster residential density. Currently, R1, they're permitted conditionally in an R1, R2, with 5 units per acre in an R1 and R2, 6 units. Proposed density would be permitted with standards in an R1, R5, with 11 units per acre. And of course, all the standards will be reviewed by planning commission in all these situations. Trying to meet the goals of additional housing options and strategic growth and farmland preservation as we look at the development and as new potential options for open green space for development or for development. Changes to the plan development section. Plan developments change from a separate district to conditional use, which means that it has still going to have a public hearing in front of the planning commission. Development standards remain the same. There haven't been any changes to those. And they only have significant changes to reduce setback from 6 to 30 feet from more similar existing setbacks in other districts and cluster residential developments. The goals are pretty much the same: additional housing options, strategic growth and farmland preservation while increasing design standards. There were a couple of questions that came up before the fee tonight in regards to the new options of a fee in lieu of open space. These will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis by a planning commission before a fee is approved for the development of open space off-site. It would first have to meet a couple of standards. Is there a legitimate reason why the open space can't be developed on-site? And that could be for environmental issues or layout of the land. Let me back up. Open space is open space that is usable. If it's a wetland or a floodplain or a floodway, that does not count as usable open space. So it's got to be open space over and above whatever can't be developed because of environmental issues. So it has to be usable open space. There could be situations where development may not strategically develop that open space on site because of some environmental issues or because of just the way the lot's designed or something else is going on. Or it may be fragmented. It could be a development that's fairly new, separated, maybe on the outskirts of town, that we can't feasibly connect to another type of recreational activity or open space that's currently in existence. And we want to have some type of logistic or a logical connection to what's already being provided. So planning commission will evaluate whether or not it's a legitimate request and whether or not it should be granted. The fee that will be used to calculate when it is approved would be the fair market value listed on the county auditor's website.
So, I got to try and get that in real dumbed-down layman's terms. So maybe I can ask the question like a kindergartner, and maybe I'm interpreting it right or I'm interpreting it wrong. So let me ask it in a different way.
Sure.
Person owns a piece of vacant lot here in town, and they don't want anybody building on it. Can they still do that, or would the city say, hey, this is a lot that is, that could be developed? And could the city come in and say, we need this piece of land to be developed? Is that something through this, so the property owner can feasibly say, hey, I own this property and I want it empty still?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
eminent domain would only, I mean, if we wanted to put, or AEP wanted to put a something in there, you know, there are certain eminent domain issues that could arise, but you can't do eminent domain for private housing.
Okay, and
So,
so vacant land owned by a property owner, we can't touch? Okay.
This would be, I guess another example would be, somebody wants to come in, they're proposing a development, and just the way it lays out, you know, that there's some green space in there that they could very easily get another, 10 units in, let's say, a cluster development or something like that. So in order to get that additional density in there, to try to get towards more housing, there's a potential, depending, like I say, case by case, they could say, well, we'll give you a certain amount of money so that we can then develop this space. Now, that there have to be green space set aside somewhere else in the city, what to preserve, and that's what the fees would be used for, either, preserving or acquiring other additional space.
Okay.
So it might be, we can do a bank of green space, that then we keep green space, and count it against a couple of those developments when they come.
Okay, I follow what you're saying now.
Yeah.
I think it's important to point out when open space is required. Open space is only required in a subdivision when there's more than 150 or more lots being proposed. Or within any planned development or cluster residential development. In that case, 20% of the usable land is required to be set aside for open space. Usually, in those cases, that open space is primarily going to be used by the residents of the cluster for that planned development. 80, the majority of the time in a cluster or residential or planned development, those roads are going to be private. Limited access, people aren't going to be driving in and out from the open space. It's going to be primarily used solely by the residents of the cluster or planned development, which is not a bad thing. But this is going to provide an opportunity where that if it doesn't make sense, or it's fragmented outside or not connected with the rest of the community in some way because of geographic location, that we could possibly use that as, it still has to be in that general area for the open space recreational activity, but somehow use it that the entire community, it's available for the entire community.
Are the fees,
Since
go ahead, sorry.
Since I've been here, none of the subdivisions have had more than 150 lots proposed. I've had several in the last few years. None reached the level where open space was required.
Are the fees meant to be a deterrent to using available open space for perhaps more housing or more structures? For the developer, to say, here's a fee, you can develop this for a fee, but we'd prefer that you keep it a green space.
Oh, yeah, well, if they're gonna keep it a green space, there is no fee.
Right, so I'm worried about if it's a deterrent enough, because we want these places to have green space. We don't, I personally, I shouldn't speak for everybody, but I wouldn't want to see 150 dwellings with no park or, outdoor green space for the people living there.
And that is going to be reviewed by plan. Again, there has to be a legitimate reason to utilize the fee rather than the open space.
And now, sorry, just for clarification, so if there is a environmental reason that you referenced, or the lay of the land just doesn't work to create, say, a playground or whatever it might be, does that wouldn't result in a fee, because it's obviously not usable for the purpose of a green space?
Correct.
So it would be an additional green space on top of that unusable?
That is correct.
Okay.
So, excuse me, would your example of, most open space is going to just be mostly accessible to the residents? You had mentioned that the fee would come into play if the open space is not accessible or cohesive with the surrounding systems of parks, trails, and recreational areas. In an instance where it's like, oh, only the residents who can live here can really get to it reasonably, because it's like, oh, you gotta come in the access road and this road, and, then would we also charge them that fee even though they left the open space?
No, if they chose to put the open space in, then that fee would be
Okay.
charged.
Sorry, I was just trying to understand the when it's not accessible clause.
Not accessible from people traveling in to use, it may be, let's take Clear Creek, for example. No open space is required, but it was adjacent, just a few blocks away from a public park. We're putting in a trail system to connect people. If they were at 150 or more units, then we'd be looking at another park there, or would it make more sense if this community already existed? Or use that to put more infrastructure in the additional units. I'm not sure I answered your question.
I think all in all, it adds more flexibility and options for the developer to pursue when he's developing an area, especially in an area where you're doing some redevelopment and you have a configuration of the site that's not very forgiving. And, there's an opportunity to do something like this mentioned, off-site, nearby, it can be connected, and those funds can be used for enhancing that for the development. So there's been a situation where people require parks, but they don't connect together. And this is one opportunity for park system to connect neighborhoods and not just have long corridors, long extreme corridors, and, allow that open space and green space, which is the purpose of some of the cluster development, is to have continuous open space rather than just a square park here, square park here, square park.
Okay.
That's where I was going with my example of Clear Creek. Let's pretend that park to the south wasn't there along Country. Then we would have, and they were putting on, we would have a pocket park there at the corner of the city that really doesn't have access from anywhere else. It's not accessible to there, except by residents. You won't be able to like that. There's no trail, there's no park for people that would go down there. There would be nothing to connect to. That's what I mean in terms of accessibility.
Okay. So perhaps phrase it another way, it's an encouragement to, hey, put your park at the front of your development as opposed to in the back, kind of.
It would depend. I mean, in a lot more like that, we have public roads and sidewalks for people to utilize, you can traverse inside, and people would like to ride through, like the homes, and, or if it's a cluster development with all private roads, that could make more sense there.
Okay.
Mr. Marion, are there any parameters for when and where these fees can be used? Are we talking they need to be within a mile of said development, or can it be the same ward, or like?
Establish any parameters.
Okay.
It would be part of the planning commission review process.
Okay, yeah.
And so this, I imagine, probably wasn't established either, so, what my concern is, and I think I kind of articulated it earlier, but if it's a very high-density, multi-unit complex, right? I'm going to use, for example, and we'll say it's much larger than what's already over there, but on 585, the housing development that's over there, the new one, yeah. It's, no, the one that's already built. The one, I forget the name of it, but it's a,
Just south of Portage.
yeah, south of Aldi and south of, yeah. What's it called? The Lofts, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we're picturing something like that with multi-units like that, right? So over 150 units. That, I think, would really be beneficial to have green space in it. And so that's where I would worry that, that a fee, nominal fee might not be enough of a deterrent, and that somebody would try to cram more units in to a space like that. And that in particular, that space is, I think, pretty far apart from any parks. I know that there is a trail, but if you're 6 years old, you're not going to ride the bike trail to a park. So that's a concern, I think. And I know that that's something that has been addressed by community members that are
Can I
worried about.
follow up on that? What would be considered an appropriate distance to a park? Because could they then, like in that example, could they then claim, well, Melrose is down the street? Well, it's probably 3/4 or a mile down the road. You do have access through sidewalks, but that would be kind of a good example there.
Mm-hmm.
I think one's typically used with respect to parks because utilization of park goes up depending on how walkable the neighborhood is around. And in terms of walkability, there's a lot of things that go in the definition, how interesting the walk is, how safe it is, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the main parameters is that it needs to be within 5 to 10 minutes of what your destination is to where you're going to go to and where you're coming from. And so that's typically about a quarter of a mile. And that's an unimpeded quarter of a mile, flat land, you know, that kind of thing, but basically a quarter of a mile. So you could set a parameter of having something on a quarter mile, if that was it, but that walkability is what really makes the park utilize more than anything else. If it's too remote from development in particular in the community, there's less of a chance you're gonna have it used for, you know, neighborhood recreation and probably something that's more community scale and, sports parks and things like that. It'd be a different kind of park.
This came up during, this whole topic came up, and it was a long discussion. Came up as a result, I think, a couple of the developers, real estate folks that were on the board actually was looking for a complete elimination of the open space requirement. That wasn't realistic.
Mhm.
So in discussions that were taking place, I don't know if it was, who was, would Jim propose it, or was it a combination of us looking at various codes and options of how other communities are looking at this? This was one of the best practices that would be utilized. And we presented it. The developers still weren't happy.
Mhm.
And still having this conversation, but this is what I thought we think the steering committee landed on. Now, just almost most development plans are placing your faith in the planning commission
Right.
to enforce when it's feasible to have the fee in lieu of the open space on site.
But Vince, in that next slide, there are some parameters there for them to
Yeah.
evaluate. And to get back to your question, Jen, the fair market value is, we're guessing or hoping is a little bit, it gives options, which is, we think are reasonable, but fair market value is a lot of money, so.
Yeah.
We won't see exactly, if this gets adopted, we'll see how, it might be nobody ever does it,
Right.
Or, I just, at fair market value, I don't see it happening a lot,
Yeah.
but I could see a few in some small instances, doing it to, to make a development, a little bit better.
So, real quick, can you go back one slide? So, when you say that about fair market value, A there says a multiplier may be applied. Is that on top of the fair market value? And is that percentage or that multiplier determined by planning commission? Or is that is there a standard, or is it? So that's an additional potential deterrent, I guess we could use, or an encouragement to keep your green space.
That is correct, and that was, we discussed this internally. There may be a situation, well, almost all situations, the appraised value may not happen until a year after the land is bought. But we will have access to what the purchase price was. So that multiplier may come into effect depending on what the current value is.
So is the fee just the fair market value of the property itself?
The land,
Or the vacant property, yes. Okay. So there isn't an equation, it's literally just if the fair market value of the property was $50,000, the fee is $50,000 if you don't have the open space.
Or it may be the purchase price,
Okay.
so,
because the purchase price is the market value.
Yeah.
so this applies, like you said, to, it has to be 150 units plus, correct?
For
And-
a single family lot, correct.
So, let's say the land value is 50,000, that would be a reasonable price for a lot here in Worcester. And I kind of go back to Jen's point, is that enough of a deterrent? Because on that lot, what could you build there, and could they say, well, I could maybe get 2 units on that considering the space, and maybe those are 250,000 apiece or whatever, and it's worth it to pay the 50,000. So I don't really have a question, I'm just kind of bringing that point up out loud that we're trying, I guess I'm kind of with Jen in what is, I guess I kind of would like to just identify, do we want it to be a deterrent, or is it just a way to collect fees? And I don't care which one it is, I just kind of want to identify, what is it, what do we want it to be?
We want it to not be a deterrent. We don't want to collect a fee. What we want is a balance between open space and new residential housing units.
Okay,
So if the fee is going to encourage additional housing units and there's, rather than having 2 acres of open space here, we can get 50,000 acres, so $100,000 to help redevelop or add on to an existing open space that's still usable by that community. You get the benefit of strategically using those funds while also getting additional housing.
And that's where then trusting the process is what you're saying, is it goes to planning commission.
sure. And that helps clarify it. That way we at least know what it is that we're trying to accomplish there.
Yeah, and that leads right into what are we doing there? So it leads what was identifying the comp plan for additional housing options, increase strategic open space, and strategic open development are the goals that we're trying, that we think this is going to assist in achieving.
If we came across that situation that we collected those fees, how are they not going to somewhere else?
They have
It's
to
already
report
in there.
in. All fees collected shall be deposited in a dedicated open space
Okay.
fund.
Perfect.
And just to say, this is a lot of the same conversations that happen in the public meetings and the committee meetings and, before it got recommended to come here too. So good questions, and same ones that we came up before.
So is this one single fund, or does each project carry its own fund?
It would I would think it's going to be one city fund.
Okay.
And it can be used for the acquisition of new open space lands, development or improvement of existing parks and facilities, and the maintenance and preservation of open space.
Would that annual report
And that would
detail?
actually go through the budgeting process.
Yeah, and we were requiring on ourselves to publish a report, here's. so
That
you-
would
you'll
line
see,
item all the fees?
Here's
and-
where it was,
and
here's
tell
what
where
it
it
used
went.
for, yeah.
Okay. And you said anytime someone wants to pay the fee in lieu of the open space, they have to come to planning commission, they have to justify it. Is them simply saying, we wanted to put 2 more units on this piece of property sufficient, right? Or is it needs to be a more nuanced argument than that?
Right. Well, I would think it would take more than 2 units, but that's talking quarter of an acre, depending on the type of development, or a single family or a half an acre. So it would be a lot. If 150 units or, you're looking at multiple acres.
And
Depending on the location, the units might outweigh having it developed there, or it might benefit somewhere else.
And I don't want to jump ahead of you, but So, just for the sake of time, when Vince was talking about transitional areas and things, the initial proposal had a lot more transitional areas, and then through the process of feedback and everything, those got reduced down quite a bit. So there was a lot of revisions. And the plan was, we said, well, let's see how this works, and if things work, or we made some tweaks, it would be like a second update. This is like phase one, and probably that's why I'm probably jumping ahead. This could be something we look at and work, see how it works, and add into that next phase of it, and tweak it if we need to make sure it's working the way we want it to.
Vince, real quick, I'm assuming too, there's something in the code regarding the open space, right? I mean, there's designs, if I put 100, okay, I can't just spray paint down and say football field.
That's correct.
And call it open space, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
As Joel alluded to, what went to planning commission and what is before you this evening took some turns from the last committee meeting. All the information was shared with committee members, all the final drafts were shared with committee members. Some of those changes were map changes and some of them were text changes. The significant map changes are the transition districts, particularly in the RT district, are all removed except for what's in the arts district focus area and what is already permitted in the zoning code to have additional unit attached single family dwelling. And the south side of Bowman, which is a corridor between the R2 and the RT district. The currently zoned RT is proposed at the transitional district. Some of the text changes is that single-family attached is now prohibited in an R1, R2, and RT district. I believe they were conditioned permitted in the original draft, so they're now prohibited. Two-family conversions are now prohibited in T1. Those were permitted in the final draft of the committee. Transition districts are added to the accessory use table. Conditionally permitted businesses in the T2 district. There were certain businesses that were permitted with standards to operate in the T2 district in terms of the live work and in the mixed use. Those are now conditionally permitted, which is going to require a hearing in front of planning commission. And we specifically put standards in place to guide how those are going to be developed in terms of parking, size, noise. What planning, it lists a bunch of standards of what I have in here, what the planning commission can look at and what conditions they can put on the applicant. Types and intensity, hours of operation, number of visits, clients, deliveries and shipments, noise, order, operation, parking, loading demands, and visual demands and signage. Next steps, one's already done, public hearing in front of the planning commission. We held that back in October, I think it was. We had several residents that were and weren't on the steering committee come to actually testify in favor of the proposed changes. Planning commission makes a recommendation to city council that was done. They unanimously recommended that the amendments be adopted, the text and the map. And here we are tonight at the public hearing at 7 o'clock in city council. Phase 2, we're going to study to see how this goes over the next several months. We're going to look at formulating a design committee to establish pre-developed, pre-approved design standards for the RT district and maybe potentially the transition areas, and examine the use of zoning tools such as accessory dwelling units. That came up several times during the committee discussion along accessory dwelling units, and an accessory dwelling unit is a smaller unit in your backyard for maybe an in-law or a family. Looking at doing that sometime over the next.
Hey, Vince, those are currently not allowed right now.
That is correct.
But I will say, in all of the, other city manager conferences and stuff, that's, especially in larger areas dealing with more restrictions even, that those are being talked about quite a bit, or, around. So, but I think that'll take some time for us to work through. What, if that even is something that we want to think about, how would that look, you know, and the committee wasn't comfortable going there at this time, that's why they just left to go.
Question?
I think you guys have done a very nice job, and yes, we kind of grilled you a little bit on, you know, the open space, but I can appreciate the flexibility that it offers. I have faith in the planning commission, and I think that they always do a very nice job of reviewing things thoughtfully, so I'm encouraged that this will be a positive change for our city. Not a question, but.
We talked about this a little bit over email, but for the benefit of everyone else, can you, because the goal is to allow more housing to be built, can you speak a little bit to, with the updated standards, how much more housing can be built? Like you mentioned with Spring Run and that, right?
Oh, yeah, I didn't bring that email with me, but put a specific number on it, it's difficult on the open space, because it's going to vary depending on what type of development the developer is looking at, what are the environmental issues, are there any environmental issues, topography of the land, or whatnot, but I believe in both Spring Run and in Spirit Creek, we're looking at about 10 to 15, between the current R1 standards and the R2 standards that we're recommending, 10 to 15 unit reduction of what was proposed.
Now, tying that into Mr. Abernathy's question, that doesn't require the developer to build with more density, but it gives them that option. So, again, that's why the number's kind of difficult. It's really asking potentially what could happen versus what actually happens, and that is really in the hands of the developer or the property owner, which are, you know, often the same.
Yeah, I would love to be able to say, you know what, we completely changed this corridor from residential to a P2 development. This is what it means. Somebody might not want to put housing above, they might want to do strictly commercial, or they want to do it.
Vince, so if we go forward with these recommendations and install the new zoning map, how does that affect current property owners, if at all?
If it's not, well, anything that's currently in place is will be allowed to continue.
Okay.
Until it's closed.
And any construction that's underway just stays under what they were,
Okay, so even if the property, like, if a property sells, it doesn't mean somebody has to redesign an RT house on the south side of
As long
Bowman?
as the current permit is active.
Okay,
Now, if there was anything else, and that would affect any of these changes. If there was a housing development that received approval from the planning commission, and they obtained their zoning certificate from me within a year after that approval, they would have a year to start construction. If
Okay.
that construction did not start, they would have to come back and follow the new code.
okay.
But I think it's accurate to say that in almost all cases, we've given the owner or the developer more flexibility. So it's not like we've made the rules tougher on them. We've broadened their options in how they develop the property.
Kim can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we changed any commercial, industrial areas
Okay,
of being proposed. It was all residential and some of the corridors on the outside of the residential.
I did find your memo you sent regarding, I think, Tyler's question, and like you said, some of it's nuanced when you get into some of like the R4, you know, and the higher density where we do allow multi-unit. You do have to have more acreage, but you could densify it more, but there's so many factors in there. But the one example that you gave is, for instance, like Spring Run or the new one on Clear Creek. Now, they came and got permission to go from the R1 and reduce it down and do an R2 type. So the code would basically adopt those things and allow for the R2. And what so if they had been required to stick to the previous standards, which are current standards, Spring Run would have got 61 homes instead of 91. And Clear Creek would have been maxed at 81 instead of the 108 they have, just to give you an idea of how this would help in single-family, I guess, type of situations.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want to address this at the hearing, but we did receive over the last week 4 letters endorsing the,
Yep. Yeah, if you can go over that in greater detail at the public hearing portion. Yep. It's 5 till, Mr. Abernathy. I don't know if you wanted to do questions still or kind of prepare
I'll-
for full council meeting.
I'll open up to the council members, anybody that wishes to ask any additional questions. Hearing none, I'll kick it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
And then committee members, do you feel like we need to call another meeting, or do we feel satisfied with Mr. Marion's presentation? Okay,
I feel pretty good.
very good.
And
oh,
just a
sorry.
reminder that even though, I mean, committee meetings serve a purpose, but they're not the only opportunity you have to talk to Vince. And if, you know, his door's always open and some are taking advantage of that. And,
Yep.
you know, so if you do have questions, you know, feel free to ask.
Yep, I did plan on leaving this on second reading to give everybody a couple more weeks to digest this. It's not an easy read. Took me a couple weeks to get through everything, but yeah, we'll still have a couple more weeks to ask questions of the city and Mr. Marion.
And I would just say, any questions come up, you know, go ahead and email us, then we will absolutely reshare all those in public, you know, so nothing you email and ask will be kept, you know, but that would help prepare and then we can reshare and review that.
Very good. Then we will end this Laws and Ordinances Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're a little before 7. Let's take a few minutes and reconvene at 7:05 to begin the city council meeting.